The shriek of feedback echoed across the street as I turned the volume dial to its highest setting. His voice crackled through the loudspeaker, clear as day. Every window on our sleepy cul-de-sac flew open, some with curiosity, others with dread. "Carol, I told you to stop calling me. I am a married man, for heaven's sake. If my wife finds out." The tape paused, the silence more deafening than the screech that came before it. Then I let the next message play. This one was worse. He did not bother to whisper, did not bother to lie. He bragged. "Tell your husband I fixed your garage. That's what neighbors do. But you and I both know what else we're fixing behind closed doors." Children stopped riding their bikes. A couple walking their golden retriever froze mid-step. Curtains twitched as neighbors leaned in closer to the chaos. He came charging out of his house, red-faced and gasping. "You turn that off right now." I stared him down, the speakers still blaring. He never expected the sweet old woman next door to have the guts or the receipts. But he should have thought of that before calling my grandchildren loud. Before filing a noise complaint on a 3-year-old's birthday. Before insulting my family. And certainly before underestimating me. Because if you think you can bully me and walk away without consequences, you clearly have not met a grandmother with a tape recorder and nothing left to lose. My name is Marion Beckett, and I am 71 years old. I have lived in the same modest brick house for over 40 years, raised 3 children here, and now I watch my grandchildren play on the very same front lawn. For the most part, our neighborhood has been quiet, friendly, even charming in its small-town simplicity. That was until Franklin Dunbar moved in across the street. At first, he seemed polite enough, always offering a wave, sometimes even chatting about the weather. But it did not take long before the complaints started. At first, it was about the trash cans. Then the wind chimes. Eventually, it was the sound of my grandchildren laughing in the yard. When he filed a noise complaint on my grandson's 3rd birthday, I knew this was not just irritation, it was cruelty. And I was not about to let him get away with it. I had always believed in letting people reveal themselves in their own time. First impressions can be deceiving, and life had taught me to observe before reacting. When Franklin Dunbar moved into the house across the street, I extended that same quiet courtesy. He was a widower, probably in his late 60s, with neatly trimmed silver hair and a walk that still held some military stiffness. On his first weekend in the neighborhood, he introduced himself to a few of us with a firm handshake and a dry sort of smile. I brought over a plate of brownies, as I did with every new neighbor. He accepted them with a nod and barely a thank you. Still, I chalked it up to nerves or grief. Starting over is never easy. For months, we coexisted peacefully. My house was always filled with life, my children visited often, and my grandchildren were practically fixtures in my backyard. I had 5, ranging from ages 2 to 12. They rode bikes up and down the sidewalk, played hide-and-seek among the hedges, and screamed with laughter when the sprinklers came on. It was the kind of joyous chaos that made a house feel alive. I was proud to be the grandmother who always had snacks, bandages for scraped knees, and arms for comfort. Franklin, meanwhile, kept to himself. He had no visible visitors, no pets, no flowers in his yard. The curtains in his windows stayed drawn most of the time. Occasionally, I would catch him peering through them when the kids were outside, but again, I gave the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just lonely. Then, small things started to change. One morning, I found a note tucked under my doormat. No greeting, no signature. Just a passive-aggressive complaint about my front porch wind chimes, creating a disturbing metallic chorus at all hours. I removed the chimes. The next week, he called the city about my garbage cans being too close to the curb. I adjusted them. Then came the pointed glares when my grandkids played tag across our connected lawns. I stopped inviting them on weekdays. Not long after that, a formal notice from the neighborhood association arrived in my mailbox, an anonymous complaint claiming excessive noise pollution and unsupervised children. That was the first time I felt truly violated. Still, I hesitated to retaliate. I was raised to turn the other cheek, to be graceful, to take the high road, especially when someone else had clearly lost their way. But I was also not someone who tolerated bullying. Not anymore. I had been through too much in life to let someone like Franklin Dunbar intimidate me in my own home. I had survived widowhood, breast cancer, and raising 3 children mostly alone. My skin was thicker than he realized. The real breaking point came on my grandson Eli's birthday. He had just turned 3, and my daughter brought over balloons and cupcakes to celebrate in the backyard. Nothing loud, nothing extravagant. Just family, sunshine, and the sound of children singing "Happy Birthday." I even made sure the party ended before dusk. The next morning, a city official knocked on my door with a formal complaint. Franklin had recorded the entire party and claimed it violated noise ordinances. He called my house a menace to the peace of the street. I looked out the window and saw him watching from behind his curtain, a smug shadow barely visible. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Because what Franklin did not know and could not have imagined was that I had kept my own records too. Years of odd noises coming from his house in the middle of the night. Footage from my outdoor security cameras, which I had installed after a break-in years ago. I had seen deliveries late at night, strange visitors who never stayed more than 15 minutes, and a few heated arguments through cracked windows. Something about it had always seemed off, but I had kept it to myself. Until now. I never went looking for conflict. But once someone brings it to your doorstep, again and again, you either let them trample you or you stand up. I knew exactly which one I would choose. The final straw came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was quiet, warm, and the kind of day where everything felt a little slower, a little sweeter. I had taken my grandkids out for ice cream and sidewalk chalk, letting them draw swirls and sunshine across the pavement while I watered my roses. Then I heard it, that sharp, grating sound of Franklin's screen door slamming shut, followed by a slow, deliberate steps across his lawn. I turned just in time to see him standing at the edge of his property, arms folded, eyes narrowed at the children's drawings. Without a word to me, he pulled out a hose and sprayed the sidewalk, washing away their colorful designs. The chalk hearts, the lopsided stick figures, the birthday cake with the number 3 on top, all gone under a stream of water and spite. I froze. My youngest granddaughter, Alice, stood beside me, her tiny face crumpling as her artwork disappeared. "Grandma," she whispered, "why is the mean man doing that?" Something inside me hardened. I walked over calmly, stepping to the very edge of my property line. "Franklin," I said, "that sidewalk belongs to the city." He did not look at me. Graffiti is graffiti. They are children. He shrugged. So were the ones who grow up to ruin neighborhoods. It was not just what he said. It was how he said it, like my grandchildren were pests, like my family's presence was some burden he had to tolerate. And it was not the first time. It had been building for months, every glare, every letter, every phone call to the city. He wanted silence. He wanted control. He wanted me to disappear. But what he did not know was that I had already started planning. That footage I had mentioned before? I had archived it, just in case. I had logged deliveries at odd hours, guests who entered and exited through side doors. I had audio, nothing crystal clear, but enough to make questions rise. I also happened to know, thanks to a chance conversation with another neighbor, that Franklin had applied for a zoning variance last year and been denied due to ongoing complaints. He wanted to turn his basement into a rental unit. But his property had been flagged for inconsistent use, and someone had mentioned the strange activity after dark. That someone had been me. Franklin had never known who submitted the anonymous tip. But I had. I had done it after a visitor had parked in front of my driveway for the 4th time, refusing to move. After I saw packages that smelled like chemical cleaners stacked on his porch at midnight. That was when I began to suspect that Franklin was not just unfriendly, he was hiding something. Now he had crossed a line. Not just with me, but with my family. And if he thought he had silenced me with his letters and his water hose, he was in for a surprise. Because I had grown up quiet, yes. I had spent most of my adult life making sure others were comfortable. I had said yes when I wanted to say no and swallowed insults in favor of keeping the peace. But I was not that woman anymore. After Franklin walked back into his house, I gathered the kids and brought them inside. I handed out juice boxes, turned on a cartoon, and told my daughter I needed to run a quick errand. What I really did was walk down to City Hall with a flash drive and a folder full of carefully labeled notes. It was time to play by Franklin's rules, only better. And louder. The city employee behind the glass did not blink when I slid the folder across the counter. I had expected questions, maybe even skepticism, but instead, she simply opened the flap, skimmed the first page, and glanced at the flash drive. "You want to file a nuisance complaint?" she asked. I gave a small, polite smile. "Not just nuisance. There's more." Within a week, Franklin received his first visit from the city inspector. I watched from behind my lace curtains as a white sedan with government plates parked in front of his house. Two officials stepped out, hard hats under their arms, clipboards in hand. They rang the bell. He answered in his usual robe and slippers, puffing out his chest like a guard dog. He looked across the street, saw me watering my garden. I waved. That was the first blow. The second came when a notice was pinned to his door 2 days later, pending property review, unauthorized use suspected. Franklin ripped it down before anyone could get a good look, but it was too late. Rumors started spreading. I did not speak to anyone directly. I did not have to. My neighborhood had a way of talking to itself. People who once nodded politely at Franklin now crossed the street. One man stopped by to ask if I had heard anything about the basement. I feigned confusion, then sympathy, then walked away. Inside, I prepared the next phase. You see, I had always been the kind of woman who documented things. Maybe it was my years working in a school office, keeping track of permission slips and medication forms. Or maybe it was just who I was, someone who paid attention. I had saved every noise complaint Franklin filed. I had photos of my grandkids playing in the yard with timestamps. I had footage of his outbursts, his curses shouted through the hedges, the way he slammed doors during family dinners like he was making a statement. But the real prize? That came from his own security camera. Months earlier, during one of his drunken rants, and yes, he drank, he accidentally left his back door wide open. His security feed broadcasted over Wi-Fi with no password protection. My son-in-law, who worked in tech, showed me how easy it was to log in. What I saw made my heart race. Franklin was not just running an illegal rental, he was hosting unlicensed events. Cash payments. People stumbling out late at night. One man urinated on the side of my garage, thinking no one saw. Another nearly crashed backing out of Franklin's yard at 1 a.m. I saved it all. But revenge, real revenge, is never just about exposure. It is about timing. So I waited. I waited until the annual neighborhood block party, the one Franklin always boycotted. This year, he had no excuse. The party committee voted to place the speaker system right at the edge of my lawn, right near his front steps. And this year, I volunteered to run the playlist. I prepared a regular mix of upbeat summer songs, the kind that blended into the background while people mingled. But just after the sun set and the sky turned deep violet, I switched the input. From the Bluetooth speaker in my hand, I played the first clip. At first, people laughed. "Is that Franklin?" someone said. The next clip was not funny. It was Franklin shouting into his phone, "I do not care if she is 70. Her grandkids are a menace. I will get them out if it kills me." Gasps rippled through the street. The third clip? That was the clincher. Grainy audio, but clear enough, a guest at one of his events saying, "You sure no one's watching? Last time we almost got caught." That was when Franklin stormed out of his house. He shouted, demanded I stop the broadcast, said I was violating privacy. I looked him in the eye and spoke, calm and clear. "These are recordings from public areas. Your property faces mine. You made me watch. Now everyone can." He lunged for the speaker. Someone stopped him. Then 2 city officials stepped forward from the crowd. They had come to see what the noise was about. Perfect timing. They had their own folder, their own questions. One showed him a paper. The other pointed to the basement door. The entire neighborhood watched as Franklin was escorted inside. An officer arrived minutes later. It was not an arrest, not yet. But it was enough. Enough for people to whisper. Enough for the inspection notice to stick. Enough for his application to rent out his property to be formally denied. Franklin never held another party. Never filed another complaint. He started parking around the back, avoiding eye contact. And within a month, a for sale sign appeared on his lawn. My grandkids drew flowers around the base of it in chalk. He did not spray them off. The day Franklin moved out, I sat on my porch with a glass of sweet tea in hand, watching the movers carry box after box out of his house. He kept his head down, speaking to no one. A few neighbors came out to gawk. Others simply stood behind their windows, not wanting to miss the final scene of the neighborhood's longest-running drama. But for me, this was not a performance. It was closure. After all those years of being treated like an inconvenience, of being made to feel ashamed for letting my grandchildren play, for having a family, for laughing too loudly, I had finally reclaimed my peace. And I did not just push Franklin out. I made sure he understood exactly why he had to leave. The day before his departure, I had mailed him one last envelope. Inside was a single printed screenshot, a still image from his security footage. It showed a man handing him a wad of cash in front of the basement door. Franklin had no idea I had that angle. But I did. I had always paid attention. On the back of the photo, I had written only one sentence. Next time, I will not keep it to myself. I signed it with my full name. He never replied. By the time the moving truck pulled away from his driveway, the entire block felt lighter. Children rode their bikes across the sidewalks he used to police. My grandkids chased Bubbles on the front lawn without fear of being yelled at. The laughter, once silenced by the weight of his presence, returned in full force. But the most poetic part? Franklin did not even get to sell the house on his own terms. The city had slapped him with fines for code violations related to his unauthorized basement conversions. His property's value plummeted. He had to sell at a loss, a deep one. And guess who bought it? Not me, but someone even better. My daughter and her husband. With my help. They turned the place into a children's play therapy center. Bright walls, soft rugs, music, and warmth replaced the cold silence and scowls Franklin once ruled with. The same home where he raged at the sound of joy now echoed with healing laughter. Some neighbors joked that we had exorcised a demon. Others just thanked us for restoring peace. As for Franklin, word had it he moved into a one-bedroom apartment across town alone, bitter, and still muttering about the old bat across the street. I had become a legend in his story. The villain, perhaps. But in mine, I was the guardian. I never wanted revenge for its own sake. I only ever wanted to protect my family. But in the end, watching him drive away, hunched behind the wheel of his dusty sedan, I felt no guilt, only calm. Because the truth, loud, undeniable, and echoing through the speakers of our block party, had finally drowned out his lies. And that, to me, was justice. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm after Franklin left. The tension that had once lingered over our street like a cloud had lifted. The children played freely again, unafraid of being scolded for their laughter. My grandchildren no longer looked over their shoulders when riding scooters down the driveway. And I, for the first time in years, could sip tea on the porch without flinching at the thought of raised voices or scathing stares. The day the therapy center opened, I stood beside my daughter as families walked through the doors. I watched their little ones run into the playroom, their eyes lighting up at the sight of art supplies, soft toys, and cheerful murals. I thought of the many afternoons I had spent defending the simple sound of joy, and how now those very sounds would help others heal. Neighbors brought casseroles and baked goods as if welcoming a new family, though the house had been ours all along. A few even whispered their thanks for what I had done, not just for the children, but for the entire street. They had feared Franklin too. They had tiptoed around him like we did. And they too felt freed. One elderly neighbor, a quiet man named Peter who had lived here longer than anyone, leaned in and said, "You did not just take your power back, you gave it to all of us." His words stayed with me. Franklin was not evil. He was lonely, bitter, and used to control. But that did not excuse the way he treated people. And when someone like that believes the world should bend to their silence, the best response is to turn up the volume, not in rage, but in truth. Sometimes, the only way to stand up to a bully is to outshine them with the very thing they fear most: connection, community, and joy. I never imagined I would become the woman who fought back with a loudspeaker. But I also never imagined being pushed so far by someone who could not see past his own bitterness. I had to protect what mattered. Now, every time I hear a giggle echo across our lawn, I smile. Not because it is loud, but because it is free. And I ask you, if someone tried to silence the best parts of your life, would you whisper back, or would you make sure the whole world heard you? Because sometimes, justice sounds like laughter on a summer afternoon.